a media box at the back. I don't know if everyone has had the chance to plug their audio in. Please do so. Before we get started, I would like to introduce Dr. Jane Goodall, thank you for coming, and Jane Lawton, who is the Executive Director of Jane Goodall Institute Canada, who will say a few words.
Thank you very much, Christine. I just wanted to open it by saying, how thrilled we are. I know you're thrilled as well, and everyone here in Sudbury is thrilled to have Dr. Goodall with us. But we're also very thrilled here at the Jane Goodall Institute of Canada. As you heard just now, Dr. Goodall travels the world 300 days of the year, so it's a rare privilege for us to have her here, and a huge boost to the efforts of the Institute in Canada. Just to put it in perspective for you, JGI Canada is part of the global network of Jane Goodall Institutes around the world. There are 23 institutes around the world? 27 institutes now. It grows all the time. We've been established in Canada since 1993. Our offices were initially in Montreal, and in 2007 we moved to Toronto. We're currently located at the University of Toronto through a partnership with the Centre for Environment there. Our work here in Canada is really focused on two key areas. The first is supporting the award-winning programs that the Institute runs in Africa, specifically in Tanzania, Uganda, and the Republic of Congo. And these are programs that focus on protecting habitat for wild chimpanzees by working with local communities on the issues that are important to them. So they're really incredible projects that focus on health, education, income generation, and helping communities to find ways to live sustainably, ultimately resulting hopefully in the survival of chimpanzees in the wild. The other key area that we work on, of course, is running the Roots and Shoots program here in Canada. You just heard a lot about that program. We're very, very excited about how it's been developing over the last little while. There are now more than 240 groups across the country. And after today's event, we're hoping that there will be many more from Sudbury. I just would like to finish by extending our sincere thanks to Science North. They have been incredible partners to JGI Canada for more than 10 years now. And this has been right from the beginning, the making of the IMAX movie, Jane Goodall's Wild Chimpanzees, through to the development of a traveling museum exhibit about Dr. Goodall and her work, and of course this annual Roots and Shoots conference, which happens every year. We're truly honored to be here today to take part in the 10th anniversary of the Roots and Shoots conference and the 25th anniversary of Science North. And the timing, of course, couldn't have been better. As Dr. Goodall mentioned, she is here to launch her new book, Hope for Animals in Their World. And there is a section that focuses on Sudbury and the amazing regreening efforts that have happened here. The next few weeks are going to be very busy ones for both JGI Canada and for Dr. Goodall. Once we leave Sudbury, we are heading to Toronto for a number of events, then to Edmonton for a major lecture, and then finishing in Vancouver, where Dr. Goodall will actually be sharing the stage with the Dalai Lama at the We Day conference, speaking to more than 16,000 high school students about the important role that they play in creating a better world. So with that, I'll pass it over to Dr. Goodall for just a few brief comments and then on to Q&A.
Well, I was really glad that somebody actually had a copy of the new book here, because I didn't have one. You didn't have one, did
no,
you?
I didn't.
Bad.
Yes, I'm not fired again.
Anyway, thank you because this book for me has meant a really exciting adventure. It's got stories from all over the world about these heroes who refuse to let an animal die. It covers insects and birds and mammals, reptiles, amphibians, literally all over the world. And in so many cases, I was able to actually speak with the person, sometimes visit the project. Occasionally it was long talks on the telephone. There wasn't usually time to go to some of these projects because they're in remote, faraway places. But it has been an extraordinary inspiration for me. And I just love it. I love the pictures in here. They all remind me of the people or the animals that I've been learning about. So I just think it's a terrific book. One of the reasons I wrote it is because there is so much doom and gloom. And yet, at the same time, I was always hearing the stories of hope And as I said earlier, Sudbury is a perfect example of restoring an ecosystem. There are several other examples in here. There is a website, Jane Goodall Hope for Animals, which contains all the details that wouldn't fit in the book. So the story of Sudbury is on that website in full. In here, it's brief. And also our project, which is the other thing I wanted to mention in my brief remarks, is our Take Care program. Jane, the other Jane, two Janes here, double Jane. The project to improve the lives of people living around areas where there are chimpanzees. And Take Care surrounds the Gombe National Park, where the chimpanzees in the early 90s were absolutely isolated because farming had crept up to the boundaries of three sides, and the other side was the lake. And it was when I flew over and saw that there was just about total deforestation, with the only trees left in the really steep valleys where even the most desperate farmers couldn't cultivate and the most desperate women couldn't get firewood, and it's very steep. So everywhere they'd been trying to farm on these steep slopes, there was terrible soil erosion, there'd been mudslides, villages with people being killed had been swept into the lake. How could we even try to save the chimps when people were living in such poverty? And so that led to our Take Care program, and that program is now in 24 villages around Gombe, and to cut out all the bits in between, it's totally holistic. It's helping people in all areas of their as they attempt to live, from education for children, concentrating on women with microcredit programs so that women can start to become empowered and get better education. We give scholarships for girls to keep them in school, and concentrating on women because all around the world it's been shown as women's education increases, family size tends to drop. We provide family planning information, which is welcomed by every single village, and every village has volunteers to talk about women's reproductive health and advise women and men in the villages. And we provide information about HIV, AIDS, etc. But because we found that there was really good coffee in the high hills where the people couldn't really make money because there's no proper infrastructure, so all the coffee, the good coffee from high up, got lumped with the inferior beans from lower down. It all went together to the coffee markets. So I was able to persuade Green Mountain coffee roasters, at least I was talking to a whole bunch of coffee roasters at their annual meeting, and I said, hey guys, we need some of you to come and tell us if it really is good coffee. And if it is, I want you to buy it and sell it for a big price and give us lots of money, give the farmers lots of money. And Green Mountain coffee roasters were the ones who came first, way ahead of Starbucks. And they said, yeah, it's great coffee. And they're now buying about 100 tons a year, including some of the other coffee companies as well, but mostly Green Mountain. You can get it from Whole Foods, the Allegra brand, and you see the little Jane Goodall Good for All brand on there. And you can get it from the Green Mountain Coffee website and the Jane Goodall Institute website, Gombe Reserve it's called. And so because the villagers have now had more money coming in than they dreamt about before, they've sat down with our wonderful expert in mapping. He does what's called geospatial mapping, GPS, GIS, satellite imagery, sat down with the villagers and helped them to make their land use management plan, which is required by the government, but which they can't usually afford to do because it's very democratic and it involves everybody coming in and getting together to plan out how to use the village land. And they've agreed to put their conservation areas in such a way that it forms a buffer between the chimps and the villagers, and also a corridor so that the chimps will be able to interact with other remnant groups. And so the only hope for the survival of Gombe chimps lies in this buffer zone and corridor. And that's simply because we help the farmers to understand. Now they care and understand about conservation of the environment. And it's a real success story that we're trying to replicate in DRC if we get the funding, and also in Congo, Brazzaville, the Republic of Congo, and other parts of Africa too. And it would work anywhere. It would work in Australia, it would work in India, desperately needs it, China. So that's all I'll say.
Great. All right, I'm not sure if I mentioned this before, but for those, there are some people that I don't know very well. So my name is Christine Catt. I'm the marketing specialist for media and communications here. Before you ask your question, I would ask that you please introduce yourself and which organization you're from. So Carol, we can start with you.
Oh, gee. You covered everything so well this morning, but I was, this will sound really crazy maybe, but I was wondering about locally, like our local animal population here. I know it sounds crazy, but I wonder what we can do. We've encroached on their territory, the raccoons, the bears, everything that are in our area. And the other day I was coming back from an assignment, and there was a raccoon on the side of the road someone had just hit, and it was struggling for its life. And you know, I came back to work and I was upset all day, and I thought, you know, like, what have we done? But what can we do? You know, I guess maybe I should have pledged a donation to the Jane Goodall Institute or something, just
Absolutely.
to placate my guilt.
There's plenty of time.
That's right, or bought your book. But you know, we are working for grander causes, but I do despair here, somewhat in the north, because we don't, even towards our pets and whatnot, we don't have the most sophisticated attitude of caring, you know. I hear from a woman who wants me to do a story about an area where there is no vet, there's no veterinary clinic, very poor care for animals. I mean, I guess I'm asking you how we can think, we can act globally and think globally, or act locally and think globally. Is that something Roots and Shoots might address? Or?
Well, basically, you're right, we're invading the territory of animals.
Mm-hmm.
Here in Sudbury, it's a rather interesting situation because all the animals were gone, and now they're coming back. But we certainly invaded them very desperately before, when they all went. And we have to somehow learn to live in better harmony with them and find better ways of keeping them away from areas where they might become a danger. And it's jolly difficult. But you know, there are people who can learn how best to behave if they meet a mountain lion or a bear or something like that. And we have to find better ways of keeping animals out of places where we don't want them to be without shooting them and harming them. And I think there are ways of helping animals not to get hit on the road, but they're expensive. There's a little light system you can have. There's a, I don't know, there are various ways, but they're expensive. So it's like everything. The whole, you know, you'll see up now these huge fighting as the world becomes conscious of climate change. You find that governments are now beginning to put pressure on industry, but the conflict is the industry says, but if we do these things, it will damage our economic potential and damage our profits. So we can't do them. And so the government is being pushed by industry on the one hand and pushed by ethics and the people who, you know, really understand in the other direction. So there's always a conflict between nature and us. And we just have to learn, and I think Roots and Shoots definitely, this is something the young people talk about all the time. And they're going to have ideas, and they're going to be up to date with the most, you know, modern technologies. So I have great hope that as these young people grow up and reach out and embrace others in different communities, that Roots and Shoots is going to make a difference.
Yeah, and I would say absolutely getting young people involved in Roots and Shoots is probably the best thing we can do to remind people of those connections. And what we find is a lot of young people get really engaged with Roots and Shoots, starting with animals. You know, that whole connection is an easy one for them to grasp quite often, and then building out from that, understanding the relationship with animals and then with the greater environment and how humans play a role in that. So for sure, encourage young people to visit our website, janegoodall.ca, join Roots and Shoots. We've got great ideas.
I'm going to suggest they develop a little whistle or something you can put on your car. I don't know, I couldn't do it, but maybe the kids could. I'm
Yeah,
sure they could.
Thank you, Carol. Bill, can you introduce yourself?
Bill Bradley, Northern Light, we put you on the front page, I guess, 4 years ago when you put fish into Junction Creek. My question is, what are you telling the world about what we're doing in Sudbury? It sounds positive right now with the community is in a labor strike, and there's some tension in the community. You could probably hear some good news from a world-renowned figure as yourself as to some of the positive and good things that are going on in this community, in the past, the present, and what's being planned for the future.
Okay, well, I can't go around the world learning all the details about everywhere I go 300 days a year. So the message I have about Sudbury is what I know, what I've seen, where I've been shown the piece of land that was left as it was, just so that people remember. And the 2 pictures in this book, which illustrate how the resilience of nature is illustrated by what happened at Sudbury, are a before and after picture where there's a little white, I don't know what the building is, but you can see the little white building is over here, and it's just bare, and it's black rock, and over here you still see the same landmark, but it's all green. I've actually been part of a Science North project, I think it was Science North, when we were releasing fish into a stream that had been cleaned up, and there's a picture of that in here as well. So these are my messages. I'm not going to go into all your social tensions and things. Those are everywhere. The Sudbury is not unique in that, and it ain't my problem.
Just to add to that, I think the other thing that, a powerful message that the Institute brings as well is that, in a time of economic uncertainty and, a lot of social issues around the world, the one thing that we do have in common is this challenge that we face regarding the environment. Everybody around the world shares that challenge. It's one thing that we can work together on. So I think it's really important to remind people that things may be tough in the short term right now, but unless we start economically, unless we start really facing that one big challenge shared globally, long term, we don't have a lot of hope.
Great, and the next person from Cambridge?
I'm Heather Dora with the Cambridge Shield. I noticed that you guys have, it's mostly younger students, high school students, grade school students right now, but what role can colleges and universities play in your organization right now?
Oh, it's powerful. We have college university program that's spreading around the world. We have a coordinator of that program is in the US office. He's called Sean Sweeney, and he's fantastic. And he's in contact with all these colleges and universities, and they are doing, when you get into college, sometimes you get very busy when you're doing medical student, you can't have time for much else. But nevertheless, there are plenty of them, and when they care, they really care, and they have great power. They're going into secondary schools, primary schools, going into disadvantaged areas. They choose their own projects. It's incredibly strong in mainland China, growing in India and Australia. It's, I don't know how many universities in Canada, but quite a few.
We have several university groups in Canada, and of course we're based at the University of Toronto, so we do have a group there. We also have opportunities. We have interns working in our office, university students who are kind of getting their start in this field. And the other thing I would mention is that in the past year, Roots and Shoots in Canada has pioneered our own Youth Leadership Council in Canada, made up of largely university students and slightly older. That is currently an Ontario-based council. It's one that's going to go national in the next year. So there are really amazing opportunities. Last year? Yes, in 2008, there was also a global gathering of 100 young people from around the world.
Youth leadership.
Yeah.
Youth leadership.
In Florida, and we'll be working on doing that again next year. Incredible opportunity for young people who have joined Roots and Shoots, become part of our youth leadership team, and then actually go on to become part of a global group of young leaders who communicate with each other, set up new projects, and are doing incredible things.
And the thing is that they have to be passionate, they have to have worked hard, they have to be eloquent because they've got to be able to inspire. So they must be inspired and then able to pass that on and inspire others. And I have to say, when I was at that conference, listening to some of the workshops, they planned the agenda, and they were covering everything from human rights and conflict resolution to alleviation of poverty and world hunger, animal trafficking, you name it. They were having workshops about it, and I wish every politician on the planet would have been forced to go and listen to the wisdom that came out of these minds. It was just fantastic.
Great, the board chef.
All right, I have any questions.
CTV?
Sure, hi, I'm Marvin, CTV. I know the impression that the IMAX movie, All Chimpanzees, had on my two boys who still talk about it. Do you find when you travel around the world, you are still getting feedback and it's helping you spread your message, this film that kind of had its roots in Sudbury as well?
Well, certainly there's some, but of course many parts of the world I go, there's no way that children could possibly see an IMAX film. So they see it on DVD, which isn't quite the same. So I would say that collectively, the films that have been made over the years have really helped to take this message all over the place. And it's been television that's helped a lot. And in places where there's no television, we can get them articles and pictures, and we try to provide the information that we can, because some parts in the middle of Africa they have no electricity.
This is Mercedes from 96 FM. I'm just curious, what is your personal message about eating meat?
Well, I'm a vegetarian because when I suddenly discovered, and when I grew up, there wasn't such a thing as intensive farming. This came after World War II. And it was kind of, yeah. So when I read Peter Singer's book, Animal Liberation, and I learned about intensive farming, I was utterly shocked. I mean, I couldn't believe what I was reading about in the pictures I saw of pigs. I've always loved pigs, especially pigs because they're so intelligent. And the first animal I ever habituated was a pig in a field, and till I got to be able to stroke behind his ears. And seeing pictures of them in these hog farms, in these, it was awful. It made me, could I eat bacon again? So the next time I looked at my plate, I saw symbolized fear, pain, and death. But some people can't just stop eating meat. So then it should be free range. And if we all ate free range, well, people must eat meat. If everyone was eating free range meat, you couldn't eat as much because you couldn't farm it. Then you'd use the whole land to farm for animals. There'd be no room for us at all. So little meat. If you must eat meat, eat free range meat, and perhaps, well, we used to, all during the war, we had meat only on a Sunday in England, a little tiny joint of meat on a Sunday. And that was all, we're fine.
I have to tell you, I actually live with two little potbelly pigs, and one of them is 15 years old. And I gave up eating meat shortly after I got my
Yeah,
first
well,
kid.
yes. Because, doesn't it?
They're like,
Brent Holland, CKLU. I'm getting the suspicion that you're not that comfortable in an urban setting, and I just want to ask you, what do you do for fun? I read your itinerary, and it's awesome. I don't know how you do it.
No, I don't actually. I don't. Well, I tell you, the one good thing is most places I go, I have friends there. Because, most places I seem to have already been to once. And what do I do for fun? I always try, if I can, even if it's for an hour, to get out into some bit of nature. I try.
Okay.
It doesn't always work. Doing this book was amazing because we made time for me to go and spend the night on the prairies with the black-footed ferret. The black-footed ferret is now being reintroduced back into the prairies in Canada too. That's the latest Manitoba.
In a couple of weeks.
In a couple
fact.
of weeks. So it's very exciting. And I was out there watching them at night, and I went to visit the California condos, and I went to see the all kinds of creatures, and that's what I try to do.
One of the things I wanted to ask you about primates, do they ever have a critical mass and come up with artistic expressions?
Well, we're primates,
Well, yeah, absolutely, but
You mean other than human
other than
primates?
humans.
You mean chimpanzees,
Chimpanzees
basically?
is in specifics.
No, I wouldn't say that. They do, I think the closest they get to that is they develop a sort of, there's a word for this. When you start a new behavior, it becomes not a cult, what's the word I'm looking for? A habit, something that somebody starts and it catches on, like a song.
Like a critical mass or a fad?
A fad, something like that. They get those. And the funniest one that ever happened at Gombe, ever, when the male chimpanzee greets a female, she often turns her rump to him. And we think that from pheromones, he can just either gently sniff her rear end or touch it with his finger, and he can kind of get a feeling about her sexual state of sexual receptivity or something like that. So that's a typical male-female greeting. So this infant, he was only a tiny little guy, and he decided that he was going to pick a twig and poke the female's bottom with the twig and sniff that. And so he began to do that. It looked really funny. And several other of the little ones copied him. So you had all these little tiny guys poking ladies' bottoms and sniffing it with a stick.
And how did the ladies respond?
Oh, they didn't care.
Like ladies anywhere. Do they also express humor amongst
Oh,
themselves?
yes.
Last question.
Well, amongst themselves, it's with hiding and kind of pouncing out and laughing, or holding down a piece of vine to a young one, and just as he's grabbing it, you twitch it up, and then you laugh. But my best sense of humour story is actually about a gorilla, and it was a gorilla who's been taught sign language. Her name is Coco, and she'd just been taught all the different colours, not just the primary colours, but all sorts of gold and fawn and stuff like that. And a young woman was just employed to deal with Coco, and she was testing her for the colours while Coco was waiting for her supper. And Coco, she'd pick up a glass and Coco would sign orange, and she'd pick up the thing and Coco would sign brown, or she'd sign green.
Wow.
And then she picked up a completely white piece of cloth. What colour is this? And Coco signed red. And the young woman said, Coco, you know better than that, red. Well, so this went back and forth for a while. And the young woman thought Coco was teasing her because she was new. So she said, Coco signed, of course. If you don't tell me what colour this is, you won't get your apple juice for supper. So Coco reached out, she took the cloth, she picked off a teeny speck of red fluff. She said, red, red, red.
That's terrific.
So that's just the best example of sense of humour I know, but the chimps have a sense.
And she got her apple juice.
She got her apple juice.
Thank you so much.
Now, is there anyone that I've missed in the room? No. If there are additional questions, does anyone just raise your hands?
You have a lot of organizations, and you guys are doing really great work, but where do you personally want to see the world in the next 10 years? Like, how far along do you want to see it? Is there any specific goal, like, say, trash reduction or anything like that?
Well, you can't really separate one out, I suppose. Right now, human population growth is underlying everything, but there are downward trends now. It's going to take a while, but, it's like a big ship. You see rocks and you start moving, but you may crash anyway. But there are trends now for reducing population levels. People in the developed world need to understand that just 2 children that they have are going to cause far more use of non-renewable natural resources than, say, 5 in the developing world, because they have so little. So that's one thing. But the water problem that I mentioned earlier is incredibly important. And then, of course, the one on everybody's lips right now is global warming. And I have to say that I just was in Greenland for the first time about 2 months ago. And I stood there with some Inuit elders where what they call the big ice, which goes up to the ice cap that covers 80% of the country. And I stood there with them, and we heard this crack as a huge slab of ice would fall away, and then there'd be a little silence, and then this reverberating, thunderous roar as it crashed down. And there was water gushing out from the the great ice, which there never was any water, even in the summer, no water. It was just always frozen. And then there'd be another crack and another rumble. And it was absolutely terrifying. And some of the elders hadn't been there since they were children, and they were weeping because the ice had dropped. The ice cliff was so much lower than when they were young. And they said that they could hear their land crying because it was being destroyed. I flew in a helicopter and we landed. This was on the other side of Greenland. I can never remember the names, but anyway, it doesn't matter. Landed on an area that had been under the ice since the last ice age and now had little plants growing on it. Flew over water that had been solid frozen at that time of year, and the elder I was with invited me there. Used to go over it with the dog sled, and now it was just water with icebergs. And if all the Arctic ice melted, which pray God it wouldn't, if it did, just the Arctic, never mind the Antarctic, it would mean 7 meters higher for the seas around the world. Well, think what that would mean. And of course all the politicians are thinking, well, that's not in my watch, but it's happening so much faster than anybody thought. That the glacier movement is, I can't remember the number of times faster, it's moving than anybody thought. So, you know, I came away from there with the, you know, like each one of us got to do our part to slow down climate change. We must, each one of us. We've got to push our governments. And,
Jane, do you want to mention Jane's journey on the 50th anniversary?
well, I could. Yes, because this piece of film, there is a piece of film of me at Greenland with the elders, and it's going to be in a film for cinema release coming out next year, which happened, the timing is perfect because it is our 50th anniversary of my arrival in Gombe, which JGI's and Roots and Shoots will celebrate around the world. And Jane's journey is made by a team of really dedicated, visionary filmmakers. And we started filming this January, and they've been with me on and off at various parts of my journey. Just did the last bit of filming. Actually, we did a little bit during the Peace Day in New York, which may or may not make it into the film. They have 300 hours of superb footage, which has to go into 90 minutes. So they're just living in the cutting room, tearing their hair.
Hi, I'm sorry, I forgot to introduce myself earlier. I'm Carol Mulligan from the Sudbury Star. I wanted to ask you, Dr. Goodall, are there ever days when you are discouraged or down?
Well, of course, that's why I keep my symbols of hope with me.
And what are
my symbols? Oh, well, this is one after the book. This little guy, the Vancouver Island marmot, was reduced to, I think it was about 12, it was a tiny number, I can't remember, it's in the book. And they've now been introduced, they've gone back into their original habitats, they are pretty safe, they were captive bred. And the other one I have, I've got many. I've got a footprint of the last black-footed ferret that was captured in the wild for captive breeding, and I've got her little footprint. And then I've got the feather of a California condor that was reduced to 12 birds with one in captivity. And now there's more than 300, of which more than 150 are free flying. Yes, and Mr. H, my mascot, he stayed at home this morning. He was tired. I'm not allowed to stay at home, but he is. This is Mr. H Jr. And the whole story of how he was given to me by a man who went blind at 21, decided to become a magician, was told he couldn't be a good magician if he's blind. He said he would try. The kids don't know he's blind. His name is Gary Horn. And he gave me Mr. H, the original Mr. H, 13 years ago. He's a bit delicate now. He used to look just like this. And he, of course, as you see, he has a tail, but Gary didn't see that. He thought he was giving me a stuffed chimpanzee, so I made him hold the tail. And he said, never mind, take him where you go and you know my spirit's with you. So Mr. H and I have been to, well, we will have been to 65 countries by the end of this tour, going down into South America. And he's been touched by about 3 million people, but 65 countries is it's only a third of the world's countries today. So 3 years ago, Mr. H. Jr. was born, and this little tag at the end of the story says, please take Mr. H. Jr. where you go and help Jane and Mr. H. spread a story of peace and hope. So he's an inspiration of illustrating the indomitable human spirit.
Last question.
I just wanted to say that you are in a film, actually, that's at CineFest this week. We have this annual event called CineFest. It's the third biggest festival of film in Canada, and you are actually appearing in one of the films. It's called Junction Creek. It's Saturday morning at 11:30.
About here.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and there's.
That's where I released the fish.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I feel like I know you so well because I was honored to do the score for it, and 2 weeks in a row, every night I would see your face on my screen. So I feel like I know you intimately, far more than you feel you know me, and maybe that's a good thing.
Well, I hope not.
But it was fantastic. It really is. And whenever I got to that part that you would appear, it was like Black Rock, all finally Jeans in it, inspiration. So I just wanted to let you know. I'll try and get your copy.
Yeah, that
I
would be
will
great.
get you a copy.
Thank you.
It'd be my pleasure.
And this, by the way, has just got onto the bestseller list of the Washington Post, less than 2 weeks after it was launched, which is nice.
Great. Well, I thank everyone for coming. Do you have any closing remarks?
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
The science man's book. I was just thinking, why did we have to do
Oh, but I have new.
They're on the books for sale right now. No, I don't think it's just this month. Yeah, so they'll be sold this week after the fair.
Who's this for? You?
Actually, my wife bought it for me before I came out.
Well, I'm so glad you
So
did.
I'm glad it was here.
I think you brought mine up.
I've got one in my bag.
You have
I've
got
got mine.
But you can certainly send it to me and my family. That would be
All right.
lovely. It's Jim.
Jim? Jim and family?
Yeah.
Do you want names?
Oh, sure. You ready for 4 more? Joan,
Your wife? Yeah.
Heather, Morgan, and Jacob.
Really fascinating.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Good.
Enjoying
Yes,
this
that'd be
late
great.
Saturday.
Sorry?
After the lousy time we had this past July.
It's gorgeous. Yeah, it's gorgeous. It's like this in New York the last few days, so it's wonderful to have this weather here. Real treat.
That's great. Did you?
I did. Oh, yes, thank you so much.
You used my very favorite.
Isn't it great? Because it doesn't bleed through. That and a fountain pen. I just discovered this about 6 weeks ago.
It's .o.c.
Okay, and then I use these, which are cheap and cheerful. They're safari pens. They don't leak on airplanes, but it's real ink. Yeah.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to see you.
It's great to see you again too. Thank you. Wonderful.
Miss Goodall?
Thank
I
you.
was told to get a picture of you with me. Oh, you're very kind.
Shouldn't be too near because I've got this infected eye. I don't mean you'll catch it. I mean it looks awful.
Oh, no, it doesn't. I didn't even notice it until you mentioned it. Is it pink eye?
No, so I don't know. This one was like this last week. And then it just got better.
It's your whirlwind tour, and I noticed you have an entourage now.
You want to be
I'll come in
infected?
that. Can I impose on you to? I will take a photo. Here, will you mind moving? Just quickly.
Here's the thing, we gave him this, and then I said, we can give some money.
Oh, yeah, I'm not even sure.
We
I
didn't
don't
know that
this building very well.
if we took a vote, we wanted to give this money over it, so I have money that I got from his account to pay for the book. Now, what I suggested
That's
to
terrific.
Sophie is if
Is
you
that okay?
did want to
And I will get you a copy. It's terrific. I'll see you inside.
You know, we had such trouble getting the photos of that photos.
The reason is prior to her coming, he wrote an article in the Star Star, and he wanted to find out in advance of that, so he wanted to.
Anyway, it was a real detective trip. Finally,
Sure, here, he's
I'd like to talk to
Sign
you.
it today.
I want to revisit that. Is your war experience such a real?
They're all not all of them.
Do you feel comfortable? Is it?
It's just kind of as you go right across. And as you come up, especially cameras, when you come out at the
So we have, we have them here.
We did use more,
That little speaker though.
Do you remember the blitz?
Yeah, we lost we were on the coast, so we weren't centrally attacked, but the enemy planes would drop their bombs. They hadn't managed to tell not to be over the sea, so they just dumped their bombs and we between two naval ports.
And your feelings as a child, was it fear, excitement, a little bit of both? Were you able to grasp the danger involved?
Well, I knew people who were young.
Yeah.
Every time there was an error in the morning, we had to throw them under the shoulder. Grew up in a world where people were fighting.
Still doing it? Would you like to go to space? Yeah. No, particularly.
I don't know, I couldn't decide what my angle's gonna be.
To go to space, but
I
a desire to go deeper. That has risen.
organizations, so she talked about
Yeah, your international life.
we've done several in the organization. She's kind of the section.
Even though this was driving back, maybe
There's one, like the main college one is States. So they have a whole bunch there, and they put on their own leadership conference. She went to it. It's like so much has its own workstation.
You're off, you're doing yours.
They really have to roll. Well, there should say right now, but she didn't know how Toronto is their main base right now, so we're going to do Toronto for several years. And I asked her, she wanted to really be happy next to the years, and she expected can't really single one thing out, but she talked about reducing, she wants to see the then she changed it to anti-abortion.
I'll give that back. We need one photo with you, Jane.
The Science North group that's here. And then we won't go to up any longer.
I'm gonna have to do a lot more.
That's right. Too much light is good.
Here, I'll scooch in over
Oh,
here.
okay. So much good a little bit.
I'll put some color on the you put it up there.
What?
I need to pull it out a little bit.
Ready? Everybody looking now? 1, 2, 3.
And it says,
One more.
We all memorize it. She's ready to make a story.
I think you're good.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
That's right.
Jane, that's my notes.
That was you?
That's how it's notes next to Canada.
I know, checking it was mine.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone, bye. No, that's not like that. Or do you want to?
I'm so glad that you went to Bears. Sounds like it every time like thank you very much.
Really?
Oh yeah. I'm sure you did read you.
Oh, I know.
Did you want to say wireless? Like the one girl. Really, that's how my photo It's not the first time you had to do this. Yeah.
Do we, were
He's
the
very
labs there too?
the labs are for tonight.
No, I know, but they came with the, they're, okay.
No.
Oh, look at this.
Yeah.
Shouldn't even.
Do you, hold on, that's okay.
Exactly.
Hey, bud, are you just thinking of nuance?
Pleasure to meet you, Brent Holland.
I'm Heather.
Okay, I'll see you tonight. I'll get rid of that for you.
Oh,
that's great. There you go, my friend.
Are you guys?
Yeah,